Dave Birkett here, along with Carlos Monarrez at Ford Field after the Detroit Lions opened the preseason with a 31-3 loss to the New England Patriots. And Carlos, as you come in here, look, the regular season is sort of overreaction Monday, right? Everybody, win or lose, you make these big conclusions from the game, and usually they go by the wayside the next week. How about the preseason? Do we do that after a game like this? I mean, no Matthew Stafford, no Kerryon Johnson, no Kenny Galladay, but the Lions look terrible. I mean, they did not look good at all, offensively, defensively. There was a lot going on. What do you make of their performance tonight?
Well, I think you have to look at, the back end of the roster, right? I mean, the Patriots also weren't playing a lot of their starters as well. So, Brian Hoyer and Jarrett Stidham versus Tom Savage and David Fales.
Take curtain number one, Alex or whoever.
Yeah, and that's the problem is they were kind of in the same boat, and the Patriots just showed that they have a lot more depth. I think guys seemed ready, they seemed crisper. We saw this in practice a little bit during training camp. That's kind of the worrisome part is your backups, the guys you expect to count on for depth. Just didn't measure up, and almost didn't show up. I mean, they got manhandled on both sides of the ball. It wasn't pretty. I mean, there's nothing. You don't want to sound the alarm too much, but it's a cause for concern because also last year it kind of started this way in preseason too. They didn't look good in the preseason.
Well, I'll say this. I think last season we came away from the preseason feeling bad about the Lions' chances for different reasons. For what was going on off the field. I think for the lack of buy-in that we sensed from the players, from some of the rumblings that you heard about, what they, just how they were responding to Matt Patricia. I'm certainly not as concerned about this, just because it's the preseason, and as you mentioned, it's backups. There's 90 guys on the roster, and half of those guys aren't going to be on the team when the season rolls around. But I think for once you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned the depth, because in the NFL, depth is crucial, and we did see a little sneak peek tonight that the Lions just don't have the depth that some of these other teams have. And it was on the offensive line where, they allowed 9 sacks, and it was in the secondary where, they couldn't cover anybody. I mean, Jarrett Stidham looked like Tom Brady out there, and this was his first NFL game. So, yeah, I think the depth is concerning, but you don't want to blow this too out of proportion because if the Lions starters are out there, Patriots starters too, it's a much different game, but I think the Lions look much different if their starters are out.
They did, and one thing I would say is look at the quarterbacks just a little bit, and I've banged on this drum before that I think the Lions just always say, hey, it's Matthew Stafford or nothing. We don't really care about anyone else behind him. Tom Savage hasn't looked great in training camp. He got hurt, left the game kind of early, so David Fales played most of the game. Fales does not look good in training camp. And they have Brian Hoyer, who's a pretty proven commodity as a backup, and they drafted Jarrett Stidham in the 4th round this year. They're investing. They have Tom Brady, the greatest ever quarterback, and they're still investing in the position. The Lions are, hey, we don't have Stafford. Well, I guess we're just going to lose the game. That's just going to be it. And I know there were a lot of other issues on both sides of the ball, but one of them was the quarterback play.
No, it was.
They consistently could not make plays and get the ball to the receivers.
So you know what's going to happen? At the end of the preseason, Bob Quinn's going to make a trade with the Patriots for Brian Hoyer. Yeah. No, that's what, because the Patriots will roll with Jarrett Stidham and
Matt Castle. My money's on Matt Castle.
Well, you mentioned the injury. I mean, look, certainly Tom Savage left the game with concussion, what appeared to be a concussion at least, slammed his head on the turf, went immediately to the locker room. Doctors took him right to the locker room. That's a concern. He had a big concussion before. Terrell Crosby, who gave up 3 sacks today, in concussion protocol. He had a concussion. He had some concussion problems in college. So, look, these are a couple, again, guys that, if you're a Lions fan, you don't necessarily want to see on the field, but certainly guys that could be on the field at some point because they were in key backup roles. So, to that point, this is just, the Lions have to be careful. They're still not a very deep team. I think they're a better team overall than we saw last year, and they're better at some key starting spots. And a lot of those guys, aren't even active right now, aren't even healthy right now, the defensive line. But yes, I think what we saw tonight does raise a little bit of a red flag about the depth.
Yeah, and we unfortunately didn't get to see enough of the offense really, being able to hit their stride and stay consistent. We didn't get too much of Ty Johnson or Brandon Powell or some of these guys. Amendola didn't play, right? I don't know.
Amendola, none of the top 3 receivers.
But don't forget, there were some injuries today, and there's going to be more in the preseason. You're going to miss. There may be a key starter who goes down, and it happens almost every year. Someone they're counting on, but it's really the backups or Jermaine Kearse, viable, decent, better backups. So. It's gonna be a test for them to see how, and it's too late right now to be looking for backup depth in the NFL. So you have who you have. They've got to show something better, something more consistency, I guess, next
Well,
week.
Jermaine Kearse, you mentioned him. That was the big injury from tonight. First series, 5 plays, I think it was 5 snaps into the game, and suffered a pretty gruesome leg injury. They came out and put an air cast on him on the field. So certainly that doesn't look good for him playing at any point this season. And you're right, we didn't see. There's nothing we could really glean from Darrell Bevel's offense because the offense just wasn't on the field long enough to sustain drives to really know. How much they're going to run, how much 2 tight ends are going to run, what they're going to try to do. We didn't see a whole lot of that because, frankly, the Lions had 4 first downs until midway through the fourth quarter there. So not a lot to take from it from that standpoint. I do want to mention I got to do the stock watch right after the game. Who's up, who's down. You mentioned Ty Johnson. I gave him an up. I gave him a thumbs up because I thought even though he didn't play a lot, he had a couple nice runs. One was called back by penalty. 6th-round pick that maybe he does a little something this year. And then Miles Killebrew. I know you wrote about Miles Killebrew. He got beat on the 1 touchdown, and that you don't like to see that. But I thought he made some good plays in the running game. And those are 2 guys. Killebrew is a guy that just what we've seen, the way that we've seen the Lions use him in training camp so far, he might have a little bit of a role on defense this fall.
Absolutely, I would expect him to. One of the things is, he's got this nice, calming veteran presence. He knows how to handle himself. He was, even when they were getting blown out at the very end, he was still talking to the players, getting them up, making sure they weren't hanging their heads and everything. And that's important, I think, to not give up. And we had a problem with that last year. Obviously, the Ricky Jean at the end of the year was talking about it. How much were the guys still willing to put themselves on the line? And I don't sense that they quit or anything or didn't give their maximum effort. They just weren't kind of up to the challenge of being, showing up and matching against the Patriots. But I think Killebrew definitely one of those guys who you can count on to know what he's doing. He's not making mistakes. May not be the flashiest player ever. He's converting from safety, so it's he's a little bit of a work in progress, but he showed a lot of promise. 6 tackles.
He showed some promise. The rest of the Lions did not. 9 sacks allowed. I think they only had 1 a late sack for them. They threw for less than 100 yards. It was just a bad performance overall. They'll get back to it next week, though. Joint practices against the Houston Texans out in Houston, and then a preseason game next Saturday. They got a couple days here to fix what ails them before that goes out. I imagine we'll see some roster moves because of the injuries they suffered tonight, but we'll see. And as always, we will be there to bring you coverage of anything that happens. For Carlos Monarrez, I'm Dave Birkett, Freak.com.